we're going to watch one of the most disgusting examples of Israeli demonization that I've seen. It's an 18-minute video by a channel that has almost 4 million subscribers, and this video is going viral. It was filmed and produced by Channel 5 with Andrew Callaghan. Now, you may recognize the name because this is the guy who used to turn up at raves and conspiracy theory events and interview crazy, interesting people. And he was fantastic as that. He was really funny. I like those videos. But when it comes to commentary on the Middle East, history and politics, this guy's not just an ignoramus. He's a deceiver. He plays with the truth. He destroys the truth, and he spins one of the worst examples of propaganda demonizing Israel that I think I've ever seen. And we're going to have a little game. Play along with me. We're going to see how many lies we can count Andrew telling throughout the 18-minute documentary. Now, I'm sure I'm going to undercount. So if you see any lies that I miss, call them out in the comments below. Let's expose this fraud for the fraudster he is.
This is an illegal settler within the Palestinian territories.
Okay, and we're already off to a flying start. Huge question. What is a lie and what is just narrative that I disagree with? Obviously, there's huge ambiguity and shades of grey. They're framing this guy as an illegal settler. Do I consider him a legal settler? Depends where he's living. None of this context is available. But there are clear laws as to where Israelis can and can't live over the Green Line. And we'll get into all of this as the video evolves.
Now maybe you'll see him with the normal uniform, but in the night he wear the soldier uniform, and he come back and start searching houses and interrogating people.
He is one among hundreds of thousands of people who migrated from either Israel or abroad to assist in the active colonization of Palestine's West Bank.
And here's the first outright lie. Hundreds of thousands of Jews haven't migrated from Israel or abroad to live in the settlements, or as they put it, take part in the active colonization of Palestine. No, the majority of Israeli Jews that live in the settlements were born there. They were born there. They didn't move from overseas. This is so easily refuted. There's 500,000 of them. They didn't move from overseas. They were born there. Let's continue.
Which begins less than 20 miles east of the Gaza Strip. He lives in a makeshift compound or an outpost settlement above a Palestinian village with a group of mostly teenagers who spend their free time attacking, terrorizing, sometimes killing and burning the homes of Palestinians at all hours of the night and day for reasons of their own.
For reasons of their own. The framing here is appalling. The overwhelming majority of violence that takes place over the Green Line is Palestinians clashing with Israelis and not the other way around. In fact, Regavim did a report where they found that 98% of the examples of settler violence that was reported by the UN didn't involve settlers. And while violence certainly exists between Israeli settlers and Palestinians, these are usually the other way around. Like this 14-year-old shepherd that was brutally murdered by Palestinians, he's left entirely out of the narrative as it's being framed by this documentary because they want you to believe that Israelis that live over the Green Line are mindless thugs that go on racist rampages, when in reality, the truth is the opposite.
So a settler is a person who decided to move to Palestine from the United States or any other part of the world because they are privileged that they have a Jewish roots in their families.
Isn't it technically in violation of the 1967 agreement for these settlements to exist?
Yes, exactly.
And we got our next lie. There is no 1967 agreement. It doesn't exist. There is nothing that was signed or agreed in 1967 that would prevent Israeli civilians from living over the Green Line. Does not exist. It's another lie.
Whenever you see videos of settlers attacking villages around here, where are these settlers coming from? Are they coming from nearby colonies, different countries, from inside the state of Israel itself?
You know, most of these settlers are actually coming from abroad.
No, they're not. They're not coming from abroad, as we just established. They were born there. There's 500,000 Jews living over the Green Line. The majority of them were born over the Green Line. This is another lie. Well, a repetition of the same lie.
Our pre-production advisor, who has extensive experience filming settlers, told us that while quite dangerous, we'd be safe around them as long as we kept the cameras rolling.
Your camera will have an almost prophylactic effect. To some extent, a cone of safety, because the settlers and the IDF who are protecting them don't want to be filmed.
At this exact moment, he is thought to be brandishing a firearm, likely a handgun provided by the Israeli army at the direction of the country's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir.
The Israeli army does not provide handguns to civilians. This is another lie. So there was a relaxation of access to handguns. So if you're an Israeli citizen that lives over the Green Line in a very hostile environment, it is now easier to get a license for that gun. That's because of October the 7th. The communities on the border of Gaza had no weapons. It was very difficult for them to access arms, and as a consequence, they were slaughtered. So the rules were slightly relaxed around accessing a handgun, which is not provided by the army. And in fact, the rules around it are incredibly strict. Should someone discharge their weapon, they have to go before a hearing, to explain why it was discharged, and if it was discharged recklessly, so there wasn't a threat to their life, they will lose their weapon, they will lose their license. It's almost impossible to access rifles and more powerful weapons unless you literally belong to the security forces or involved in some sort of security role. This documentary tells lie after lie.
Itamar Ben-Gvir, an outspoken religious supremacist who believes in the total annexation of historic Judea, as it was once called within the Kingdom of Israel over 2,700 years ago.
It wasn't called Judea 2,700 years ago. In Resolution 181 from the United Nations, which proposed partitioning the land, they literally call the region Judea. Judea is the historic name. And the map that you provided was actually of the Kingdom of Israel. South of that was the Kingdom of Judah, Yehuda. And at one point before that, they were united as the United Kingdom of Israel. But your understanding of the history of this region is appalling. There is no way that you should be creating a documentary trying to explain the reality on the ground when you have such an appalling grasp on the current reality and the historic reality.
Well, what happened was post-October 7th, Ben-Gvir authorized the release of larger numbers of high-caliber firearms, so virtually all the adults in the West Bank would have qualified for a kind of machine gun.
No, they don't qualify for a machine gun. As I just explained, they qualify for a handgun. Machine guns are virtually impossible to access in Israel. But, yeah, why tell the truth when you can tell lies?
طبعا هذا العمل العادي يعني احنا هذا بنهتمش فيه كثير جدا هذا لأنه روتين عادي.
The villagers say they're doing their best to ignore the kid because taking the bait in any way could be a fatal mistake. The settler, they say, is on an intimidation run, hoping to provoke a reaction of some kind, after which he'll call on the army and have people arrested. Villagers say that the Israeli soldiers who arrive shortly after to make baseless arrests are typically just outpost settlers themselves in different outfits, which may seem a bit strange unless you get what this whole routine is about. It's about clearing the area by any means necessary.
And here's another lie. It's not about clearing the area by any means necessary. The military's function here is to keep the peace. And they regularly arrest Israelis and they regularly arrest Palestinians that are breaching the peace. That's their job. They're not trying to clear the area of Palestinians. If they did, if that were the desire, they'd just bring in the bulldozers and steamroll every property in Area C. But that's not the case. That's not what happens because that's not the intention.
And as for the settlers, they've been given a broader license to kill than Klansmen who enacted racial terror in the American South after the Civil War, with 95% of police investigations immediately dismissed and not a single jail sentence ever handed down to an Israeli settler involved in the murder of a Palestinian.
I mean, the lies are coming through so fast and so thick, but they're so easy to refute. They're claiming that no Israeli settler has ever been arrested. Then who is Amiran Ben Uliel? He's currently in jail serving a 20-year sentence for his role in the Duma arson attack.
He can do whatever he wants. He can raid this motorbike or whatever. He can have sheep. He can build wherever he wants. He can do whatever he wants.
The lies just keep on coming. In a few minutes, I guarantee they will show you how Israelis are not allowed to enter certain Palestinian areas. But this guy's just claimed they can go anywhere they want. It also claims that they can build anywhere they want. Well, if that's the case, then why are the Israeli security forces destroying these illegal Israeli outposts? It's because they weren't authorized. Authorized buildings can stand, be they Israeli Jewish or Palestinian Arab in Area C, and unauthorized ones regularly get demolished.
And all of this, and I mean all of this, is funded by US tax dollars.
Absolute nonsense. US aid is not US aid. It's not money that goes into the coffers of Benjamin Netanyahu or Israeli civilians. It has to be spent, or the overwhelming majority of it has to be spent on US arms. It subsidizes the US arms industry. Israel is then limited in what it can produce. So instead of developing, say, the Lavi fighter jet, which Israel was doing, they have to purchase F-35s. It's a mechanism to control the most powerful military in this region, Israel. The aid does not go to private citizens. So if a property developer builds an apartment block in a settlement over the Green Line, that's not funded by America, it's funded by the developer. If a civilian, a citizen, purchases an apartment in that apartment block, then that's the civilian, the citizen, that's paying for that. In no part of this exchange, this transaction, does America play a role?
Welcome to Aida refugee camp. Today is about 5,000 people live in this camp. Half of this number are young people and children.
So at least 2,500 of them are not refugees then, because they were never displaced. They were born there. To be a refugee, you have to be displaced from your place of origin. You have to cross a border. None of these people have crossed the border. So actually their grandparents were internally displaced. They believe they are in Palestine today. They believe Bethlehem is Palestine. So they believe that they are Palestinians. So they are Palestinians living in Palestine, yet we're supposed to believe that despite never experiencing any displacement, that they are somehow refugees. This whole refugee narrative is a complete scam.
Aida was initially established by the United Nations shortly after the Nakba, or the catastrophe of 1948, which the Israelis called the War of Independence.
The Jewish state will include the ports of Haifa and Tel Aviv.
It began when 5 Arab nations launched attacks on Jewish cities and settlements within Palestine, most of which had been under colonial British rule through the Balfour Declaration, until it expired on the midnight of May 14th, 1948.
Had been under British colonial rule through the Balfour Declaration. It's kind of half true. I don't know if this is a lie or not. So the Balfour Declaration was an assurance given by the British government to the Zionist Federation of Britain that they would support the establishment of a Jewish national home in this region. But the mandate was from the San Remo resolution after the Ottoman army was defeated, which came after the Balfour Declaration. That's where the mandate was given. And I guess in a way it's true. It was the British were given the mandate over the territory, which included Jordan as well, on the condition they turn it into a Jewish national home. They immediately did a U-turn and gave away 78% of the land to foreigners from Arabia, but we'll ignore that. We'll ignore the Hashemites in Jordan.
The State of Israel, or the Jewish state, was declared the very next morning along the lines of a partition plan approved by the UN a year prior.
The plan was accepted by 33 votes to 13.
This sparked outrage within the Arab world, jump-starting an inevitable conflict and causing Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and their Palestinian counterparts to invade.
How was it an inevitable conflict? These bold statements just show a complete historic illiteracy. So Faisal and Weizmann had actually agreed to the existence of a Jewish national home in the region prior to the establishment of the State of Israel. It was only through the radicalization and the activism of people like Haji Min al-Husseini that the idea of a Jewish state became intolerable to the surrounding neighbors. But absolutely, to assume that Arabs cannot accept a Jewish state here, if anything, is the bigotry of low expectations.
Israel ultimately won the war, and as a means of collective punishment, they created the Nakba, the catastrophe, forcing 750,000 Palestinians from their homes and onto places like the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Wow. So the documentary is now claiming that 745,000 Arabs were forced out after the war as a means of collective punishment, the Nakba. Well, first, the term Nakba was coined by Konstantin Zuraik, and he coined the term, an Arab academic, to describe the defeat, the humiliation of the Arab armies because they were unable to drive the Jews out. Now, if anyone has even the slightest awareness of this conflict, they'd know that a third to a half of the Arabs that did flee the conflict fled before the Arab invasion of 48. Before. So how is that a collective punishment after? The remainder of which, the overwhelming majority, fled during the war and not after. Israel didn't drive people out as a means of collective punishment. This documentary is so historically illiterate. I cannot stress this enough. Do not get your education from YouTubers. This guy should stick to going to raves and interviewing people that are off their head on drugs, because he does that very well. He should stay away from historical and political commentary because the guy is an idiot. The guy is an absolute moron.
Here, 27 names of the villages, which is the families who live in Aida camp, they came originally from. For lots of families, they're still keeping the key, and even though they knows all their houses destroyed it in 1948, but it still gives them a hope that one day they will back again to their homes.
Do you know which village in particular on the occupation side your family first came from?
Yeah. Beit Jibrin.
Beit Jibrin was just one of around 400 villages depopulated during the Nakba. Today, it is a totally renamed kibbutz.
Welcome to Beit Jibrin,
which is the Israeli version of a socialist commune, completely inaccessible to any Palestinian.
Beit Guvrin, not Jibrin, was an ancient Judean city. It was an ancient Judean city. Jews inhabited it basically on and off for a millennia. Now, it was populated with Arabs under the Islamic ways of conquest, and they established a village nearby, near to the ancient Jewish city. But that village was occupied by the Egyptian army in the 48 war, who turned it into a key strategic military base. There were battles waged here between the Israelis and the Egyptians, and that's why the villagers fled. But despite this, any Arab that remained in Israel and has Israeli citizenship, of which there are around, well, there's over 2 million of them, they are free to enter the village, the kibbutz, as they please. And any Palestinian who has a permit to enter Israel, and many do, they are free to visit the village as well.
The massive wall surrounding the camp was built in 2004 in the midst of a bloody conflict called the Second Intifada. The conflict took upwards of 5,000 lives. The Israelis say the Palestinians started it by targeting police and protests that turned violent, whereas the Palestinians generally place blame on the collapse of peace talks at the Camp David summit in 2000, as well as a provocative visit by Israeli politician Ariel Sharon to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam, which happens to also be built on a plot of land called the Temple Mount, which is the #1 holiest site in the Jewish faith. Total nightmare.
The Intifada was launched because Arafat walked away from the peace process. Clinton's on record saying that the Israeli offer was incredibly generous, the peace offer, the proposal for peace. And Arafat walked away, didn't provide a counter-proposal, and then the Palestinians launched the Intifada in the aftermath of that. Also, I just want you to note that they're saying that a Jew visiting the most holy site in the Jewish world is provocative. Meanwhile, millions of Muslims pray there. 1 million Muslims pray there every year. We don't see that as a provocation. It's insane that a Jew praying at our holiest site is considered a provocation and would launch an intifada that would lead to the deaths of thousands of people. This is the absurdity of this conflict.
After they finished the wall, they built more than 7 military watchtowers. In this road here, we have lost 3 children from these watchtowers. Muhammad, he was in his home here in this building, 10th of November 23, He was killed from the watchtower in front of us by a sniper. He shot him a live bullet in his chest. He did nothing.
Now, I can't tell you if Mohammed had political affiliations or was involved in violence that led to his killing, because it's not been widely reported. What I can tell you is this is footage from his funeral, and you can clearly see at least 3 Hamas flags present. Now, I don't want to get into the details of how he came to die, because I truthfully don't know, and I'm not in the business of propaganda. But what I can tell you is that these guys, Channel 5, Andrew Callaghan, are 100% propagandists, because this is the image that was used of Muhammad in his Shahada posters. So you can see he has a full beard at the time he was killed. A full beard. Now, I don't know about you guys, but he doesn't look much like the kid that Channel 5 just showed you.
Places like Ida were never supposed to be permanent. According to UN Resolution 194, which was signed by Israel, Nakba refugees would eventually be given safe passage back to their villages, and those who chose not to return would be given compensation in the form of a reparations package.
Israel never signed Resolution 194 because at the point of the vote, Israel wasn't a member of the United Nations. It hadn't yet been admitted. There were parties that were fighting that were in the United Nations: Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen, and they all voted against the resolution. And one of the key reasons they voted against it was because it spoke about all refugees, including the Jewish refugees, which were far more numerous than the Arabs, from Arab lands, who left behind billions of dollars in assets and property, and all of this would have had to be compensated. So the Arab states obviously opposed this and voted against the resolution. Israel wasn't party to the vote because they weren't yet a member. This is another lie told by the documentarians.
I tell Musa that we'd like to see some of the illegal settlements that people have been talking about.
22 new illegal settlements on Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank.
If the settlements have been approved by the Israeli state and they're in Area C, then they're not illegal. You see, according to Oslo, both the Israelis and the Palestinians agreed that Israel would have full civilian and security control over the territory. This means that Israel was in charge of zoning and planning. So if Israel authorizes the construction of a new community in Area C, then it's legal. These are legal settlements, legal communities. Similarly, if the Palestinians construct something in Area A, which they have done relentlessly, that's also legal under Oslo. Israel has no authority to go in and destroy a community for zoning or planning purposes in Area A, because if they did, they would be in contradiction of Oslo. Similarly, by the way, the Palestinians basically abandoned Oslo, violated the agreement by seeking statehood independent of Israel. And so that is in direct contradiction to the Oslo Accords. There have been many violations by the Palestinians. But Israel building settlements in Area C, if it's authorized by the state, it's not illegal.
My only exposure to their existence thus far had been through Louis Theroux's recent documentary, Settlers, where he was able to gain rare access behind the curtain of these ultra-nationalist enclaves, which he claims contain people even more extreme than those he interviewed in South Africa after apartheid.
Just the lethality of it and the extent to which the objective of the settlers is to for many of them, it's to drive the Palestinians out.
This is yet another inversion of reality. It's actually the Arabs that overwhelmingly want to drive the Jews out. I'm sure you've heard the occasional person say, Israelis, go back to Poland, go back to New York, go back to wherever you came from, get out of Palestine. Meanwhile, the Jews have consistently agreed to a two-state solution, the acceptance of Arabs living in the land. In fact, there's over 2 million Arabs that live in Israel today and not one Jew that lives under the Palestinian Authority. Why? Because Jews are willing to coexist, and the majority of Arab nationalists want to drive the Jews out and take the entire territory for themselves. But again, This was all inverted in this documentary, and it's the Israelis that want to kick the Arabs out.
Like under apartheid, the white South Africans, they didn't tend to say like, we want to drive the Africans, the black Africans out. They wanted to subject them to a punitive and degrading legal regime, but they weren't routinely, as I understand it, every day. I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to appear to minimizing any aspect of apartheid, but what I saw in the West Bank was a life that was day to day unlivable.
Day and day unlivable. Like, I drive these roads every single day. I see Range Rovers, I see BMW M4s, I see Jeep Rubicons, I see Porsches, all with Palestinian license plates on. If you go through any Palestinian village, you'll find at least one villa. There's entire cities like Rawabi, which look more fancy than any Israeli city I've ever seen. Life in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, for Palestinians is not what these guys want you to believe.
Musa says that while there are some settlements around Aida and Bethlehem, our best bet to get a true candid look at an urban landscape ripped apart by settlements would be about an hour south in the city of Hebron. So we hopped in the car and went for a drive.
So this is an Israeli colony. And all the way to Hebron from now or even before, you're gonna see a lot of Zionist colonies when it's not legal according to the agreements.
He says that it might take us up to 5 hours to get there because of the sheer volume of highway checkpoints that have been built by the Israeli military.
These guys are such liars. So earlier they showed you the route that they passed and they then filmed all the footage along the way. So we know the exact route that they took. And they left Bethlehem from the Al-Khadr junction and then they drove south along Route 60 to Hebron. It's around an hour's drive with traffic and you don't have to go through any checkpoints.
Today there's over 800 checkpoints and their primary purpose is safety.
So they're basing this claim off an OCHA report from 2024, which said there are 793 obstacles, of which 89 are checkpoints. Now, half of the checkpoints are either accessing Jerusalem or Hebron. And the overwhelming majority of the obstacles are things like dirt mounds or newly installed gates, all of which are security measures in the wake of October the 7th.
Which means keeping Palestinians away from settlements and off of the pristine, separate highways they've built between settlements and into mainland Israel for cars with yellow Israeli license plates.
I genuinely don't know what to do with these guys. They're literally sitting in a Palestinian car on one of the roads they're claiming Palestinian cars can't drive on. They're filming other Palestinian cars with the white plates, not the yellow plates, on the same road, Route 60, driving freely, and claiming that Palestinians can't drive on these roads. Well, what do you do with liars like this? They're literally taking you for mugs.
But our car had a green Palestinian license plate, which destined us to hours in traffic and potential military detention without cause. And here's why. So back in the 90s, there was something called the Oslo Accords, an alleged peace negotiation between the Israeli state and the Palestinian Authority, which would supposedly end in an amicable two-state solution. During Oslo, and for a 5-year temporary period, the West Bank was divided into 3 administrative zones, Area A, B, and C. Area A, representing 18% of the land, but a far majority of the Palestinian population, was under full control of the PA, Palestinian Authority. Area B, representing 22% of the land and mostly encompassing rural communities and certain sections of Jerusalem, was under the shared control of the PA and the Israeli army. And then Area C, representing a whopping 61% of the land but home to very few human beings, was under full Israeli military occupation. Notice I said temporary because all this land was supposed to be transferred back to the Palestinians by the year 2000.
Back to the Palestinians? How could it be given back to them when they never possessed it? In 1948, Jordan conquered the territory, renamed Judea and Samaria the West Bank, Jordan being the east bank of the Jordan River, Judea and Samaria being the West Bank. And then after failing to acquire more territory in 1967, Israel pushed Jordan out of Judea and Samaria, and they became the so-called occupiers of the territory. And this is where Oslo emerges. Now, Oslo comes out of this process. It's not talking about a two-state solution. Palestine as a state is never mentioned during the Oslo Accords. But there's an interim agreement. The areas A, B, and C are created. The Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian National Council is created. The police force is created. And this is all a stepping stone, a process to the final status, which is going to be negotiated during this 5-year period that we're discussing. But the Palestinians walked away from the process. Clinton said it was a very generous offer that Israel gave to the Palestinians. They would have had a state. They would have had East Jerusalem as a capital. It was a good deal, a generous deal, but Arafat walked away from it and launched the intifada. That was the breakdown. There was never at any point in the Oslo Accords any discussion around returning Area C. This was all part of the final status negotiation. The final status negotiations dealt specifically with territory, which settlements would remain in Israel if the area was going to be turned into a Palestinian state. Maybe it wasn't going to be a Palestinian state. Maybe there was going to be a binational state. All of this was to be discussed during this negotiation period. But according to Andrew Callaghan, Israel had agreed to give back territory to the Palestinians that the Palestinians never had and was currently populated by Jews. FYI, Jews make up the overwhelming majority of people living in Area C, and Palestinians make up the overwhelming majority, the entire majority, of people living in Areas A and then B as well.
It's in these C zones that almost all the settlements exist, which look almost nothing like I thought. I had a vision in my head, likely informed by social media, that most settlers were young, crazy kids on the hilltops like the one that I'd previewed earlier. Yet the colonies that Musa and I drove by, almost every few miles, looked more like gated communities in Scottsdale, Arizona, advertising relatively affordable, subdivision-style, cul-de-sac, spacious homes with swimming pools and nearby access to grocery stores and movie theaters. At that moment, I began to understand what Louis Theroux meant when he talked about the diversity of settlements.
I can't say exactly how many settlements there are, but there's a lot. I think more than 100, maybe 200 or 300. And in addition, there are what are called outposts.
There's around 150 official settlements. The outposts are additional to that, and maybe there's another 100 or so of those. But again, more lies from Louis, more lies from Andrew.
Israeli activists, often youth, settler youth, take a hill or take a little area, put camps up, and then oftentimes the IDF will de facto kind of defend them.
And there you have it. Louis lets slip that he actually knows what's going on. The IDF are there to defend. Defend them from what? If it's just the Israelis going on rampages, what would they possibly need defending from? Because the Palestinians, as far as we can tell from this documentary, are just poor, helpless victims of Israeli aggression. No, the IDF are protecting the civilians because they face waves of terror attacks from Palestinians. And their job as Israel security force is to protect the civilians, whether they are in Area C or whether they are over the Green Line. They're also there to keep the peace, and the IDF regularly arrests Israeli settlers from the outposts or elsewhere that are involved in violence or crimes against Palestinians.
But there's other settlements where they are larger and more suburban looking. So at least some, or maybe most.
I'm going to count this as a lie. That's not an Israeli settlement. That's Bethlehem. That's Palestinian. And I can guarantee you, however many grocery stores that Louis and Andrew are offended by in the Israeli settlements, there are far more grocery stores in Bethlehem. And as nice as some of those settlements looked, I can guarantee you the houses, the villas, the mansions of Bethlehem make the Israeli settlements look like slums. But you don't get any of this from the documentary because they intentionally leave it out. They drive past the Palestinian villas and choose not to film.
The people there will be either economic migrants, interlopers, like they're people who've gone there mainly to get cheap housing. And then some of them are ideological settlers who've come from America or elsewhere. And then there's even more extreme and crazy ones that we didn't get into because most of them don't really want outsiders in there.
You think they know that it's wrong what they're doing?
They know that the world views it as wrong.
Yes, we know that the world doesn't like Jews living in Judea. Just like the world didn't like Jews living in Europe. Just like the world didn't like Jews living in the Muslim world. we're well aware that wherever we live, there are going to be a very large majority of people that don't want us there. But thank God there are Jews in Judea. This is the heartland of the Jewish story, the heartland of the Jewish religion. The biblical highway, Route 60, that we keep on seeing, goes from Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood, to Jerusalem, where the temple stood, to Hebron, where the patriarchs are buried. This is the Jewish heartland. I thank God that I live in a generation where we can witness people living there. I don't want to see any Arab displaced. I don't want to see any Jew displaced. I'm happy that both communities live here. But people like Andrew and Louis have a moral issue with Jews living in the land that they're indigenous to.
As we make our way to a checkpoint, I notice a strange red sign in the distance.
This road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden, dangerous to your lives, and is against the Israeli law.
So it's against Israeli law as a consequence of Oslo and the agreements that were made. But ignoring that, by the way, there is an actual apartheid system that exists here. Israeli Arabs go in and out of Area A all the time. If you go into Area A, which I do often, you'll see yellow plates everywhere, license plates. So this is Arabs from Israel that freely drive around. The issue is that if a Jew drives in, that sign should say the entrance for Israeli Jewish citizens is forbidden and dangerous to your lives, because it isn't the case for Arabs. But ignoring that, can you remember at the beginning of the video when I said that we'd see that they were lying about the guy on the motorbike on the quad, who they said he could go anywhere he wants, anywhere in the West Bank, Judean Samaria that he chooses? Here we can clearly see that is not the case. He's not able to enter Area A. He's not able to enter Area B. And if he does, he can face arrest.
We need to be quick.
Musa says it's been put up by the Israeli army as a way to instill fear in mainland visitors and restrict commerce, and that it marks the beginning of an Area A enclave. Across the street, I also notice a bulldozer on a hilltop that appears to be tearing down a local village.
Oh, there's no village there. There was no village there. These guys just lie. There's never been a village on that hilltop. We know that from satellite imagery. Look, this is the hilltop a decade ago. There's no buildings there. It's a barren hilltop, state land. Now, there has been an Israeli military outpost at different points there because it's the highest hill or the second highest hill in the area. But there's never been a Palestinian village there. And what happened was, over the last decade, Palestinians began constructing, illegally, because this is Area C, buildings. They built a house, which is this building here, some storage buildings, and some walls to grab territory, to grab land. And that's not being demolished. The house still stands. You can see where they've begun building the new settlement. The Palestinian illegal structure still stands. There's maybe an ongoing court case with that, I don't know. But there was no village destroyed. There was no village destroyed. The outpost, the settlement, was built on state land legally.
I step across the street to get a camcorder shot.
The soldier is watching us.
English.
What are you doing?
Oh, I'm taking a video.
Fuck.
For the crime of taking a camcorder shot of an illegal settlement while in the company of Palestinians within Palestine, I was placed under Israeli detention by 2 teenagers from New Jersey. They couldn't explain the crime, but seemed more than happy to give out the time.
They literally just said in Arabic, "Why are you filming Merom Yehuda?" They explained exactly why you were being arrested. You visited Israel in the middle of an Israeli-Palestinian war. You've rocked up to an Israeli community and started filming them with a car full of Palestinians. It's obviously going to arouse suspicions. But I'm not going to frame that as a lie. I'm going to say that's just narrative. Okay, fine. You're framing it in a way that you wish to as the documentary maker. But what is an outright lie is you said 2 teenagers from New Jersey. Now, we can see with our own eyes, they don't look like teenagers. And if your ears work, let me just replay that thick New Jersey accent.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? Yeah, sounds exactly like everyone I know from New Jersey.
If you'd like to see and hear about the next phase of our journey, where I explain the interrogation process, visit the Al Ibrahim Mosque on both sides, and witness the invasion of central Hebron by a group of settlers.
And there we have it. We're done. Now, I don't know about you, but I counted 25 lies. 25 in an 18-minute video. That's over a lie a minute. That's quite impressive, even by anti-Zionist standards. So let me know in the comments below if you found even more.